So we are going to switch up this session and share more of her work. And like I said, she's super famous. I don't think any of our Echo projects will ever be able to afford her speaker fees, but we're going to check out some of her really great content that's online. If you were interested in learning more about mindfulness and stress management, we do have some great sessions that was featuring our colleague from ICI at the University of Minnesota, who helped us develop this series. So I'm going to put this in the chat and highly recommend you check that out if you are interested in learning more about mindfulness and coping with stress. So that's in the chat now for you to check out later. But yeah, so I know that many of you were interested in Brené's work on shame and vulnerability, and I'm guessing that some of you may have already started down a little bit of a rabbit hole. I do want to say that I highly recommend checking out her Netflix special, and she has a lot of really great podcasts. So if you go to your favorite podcast app and just type in her name, you're going to see tons of interviews with her, but then she also has her own content that's just fantastic. I listen to probably at least 2 to 3 episodes a week. Also, it's funny, I was listening to her Netflix special in the car when we were driving down to South Dakota, and I remember my husband looking like he was sleeping next to me, and all of a sudden he just like arose from the grave and was like, I've experienced this exact same thing. And I was like, oh, that you're sleeping. So I really do think that it is worthwhile checking out some of her other content, but we are today going to focus on that anatomy of trust. So yeah, let's go ahead and watch this video, and she's going to provide a really great framework to help when you are rumbling with trust issues with the people in your lives. So Jessica, if you could nod, I'm going to play this and tell me if you can hear it.
Woo! Hey! This is my intention right now. Don't cry before you start. Don't cry before you start. Oh, it just feels like an incredible understatement to say how grateful I am to be here with all of you. I feel like I have a relationship with many of you on social media, and you were like, T-minus 2 days. I'm like, it's coming. We're going to be together. So I am so grateful to be here with you. I'm going to talk about trust, and I'm going to start by saying this. One of my favorite parts of my job is that I get to research topics that mean something to me. One of my least favorite parts of my job is I normally come up with findings that kick me in the butt and make me change my entire life. That's the hard part. But I get to dig into the stuff that I think matters in my life, in the life of the people around me. And the topic of trust is something I think I probably would have eventually started to look at closely because I study shame and vulnerability. But there's a very personal reason I jumped to trust early in my research career, and it was a personal experience. One day, my daughter, Ellen, came home from school. She was in 3rd grade, and the minute we closed the front door, she literally just started sobbing and slid down the door until she was just kind of a heap of crying on the floor. And of course it scared me, and I said, oh my, what's wrong, Ellen? What happened? What happened? And she pulled herself together enough to say, something really hard happened to me today at school, and I shared it with a couple of my friends during recess. And by the time we got back into the classroom, everyone in my class knew what had happened. And they were laughing and pointing at me and calling me names. And it was so bad, and the kids were being so disruptive, that her teacher even had to take marbles out of this marble jar. And the marble jar in the classroom is a jar where if the kids are making great choices together, the teacher adds marbles. If they're making not great choices, the teacher takes out marbles. And if the jar gets filled up, there's a celebration for the class. And so she said, it was one of the worst moments of my life. They were laughing and pointing, and Miss Balcom, my teacher, kept saying, I'm gonna take marbles out, and she didn't know what was happening. And she looked at me, and she, just with this face that is just seared into my mind, and said, I will never trust anyone again. And my first reaction, to be really honest with you, was damn straight. You don't tell anybody anything but your mama. Yeah, right? That's it. I mean, that was my like, you just tell me. And when you grow up and you go off to school, mama will go too. I'll get a little apartment. And the other thing I was thinking, to be quite honest with you, is I will find out who those kids were. And while I'm not going to beat up a 9-year-old, I know their mamas. That's the place you go to. And I'm like, how am I going to explain trust to this 3rd grader in front of me? So I took a deep breath and I said, Ellen, trust is like a marble jar. She said, what do you mean? And I said, you share those hard stories and those hard things that are happening to you with friends who over time you've filled up their marble jar. They've done thing after thing after thing where you're like, I know I can share this with this person. Does that make sense? And that's what Ellen said. Yes, that makes sense. And I said, do you have any marble jar friends? And she said, oh yeah, I totally. Hannah and Lorna are marble jar friends. And I said, and then this is where things got interesting. And I said, tell me what you mean. How do they earn marbles for you? And she's like, well, Lorna, if there's not a seat for me at the lunch cafeteria, she'll scoot over and give me half a Heine seat. And I'm like, she will? She's like, yeah, she'll just sit that like that, and so I can sit with her. And I said, that's a big deal. This is not what I was expecting to hear. And I said, then she said, and you know, Hannah, on Sunday at my soccer game, and I was waiting for this story where she said, I got hit by a ball, and I was laying on the field, and Hannah picked me up and ran me to first aid. And I was like, yeah? And she said, Hannah looked over and she saw Oma and Opa, my parents, her grandparents, and she said, look, your Oma and Opa are here. And I was like, boy, she got a marble for that? And she goes, well, you know, not all my friends have 8 grandparents. Because my parents are divorced and remarried. My husband's parents are divorced and remarried. And she said, and it was so nice to me that she remembered their names. And I was like, And she said, do you have marble jar friends? And I said, yeah, I do have a couple of marble jar friends. And she said, well, what kind of things do they do to get marbles? And this feeling came over me, and I thought, the first thing I could think of, because we were talking about the soccer game, was that same game, my good friend Eileen walked up to my parents and said, Deanne, David, good to see you. And I remember what that felt like for me. And I was like, certainly, trust cannot be built by these small, insignificant moments in our lives. It's got to be a grander gesture than that. So, as a researcher, I start looking into the data. I gather up the doctoral students who've worked with me. We start looking, and it is crystal clear. Trust is built in very small moments. And when we started looking at examples of when people talked about trust in the research, they said things like, yeah, I really trust my boss. She even asked me how my mom's chemotherapy was going. I trust my neighbor, because if something's going on with my kid, it doesn't matter what she's doing, she'll come over and help me figure it out. You know, one of the number one things emerged around trust in small things? People who attend funerals. This is someone who showed up at my sister's funeral. Another huge marble jar moment for people, I trust him because he'll ask for help when he needs it. How many of you are better at giving help than asking for help? Right? So asking for help is one of those moments. So one of the ways I work as a grounded theory researcher is I look at the data first, then I go in and see what other researchers are talking about and saying, because we believe the best theories are not built on other existing theories, but on our own lived experiences. So after I had looked at this, I said, let me see what the research says. And I went to John Gottman, who's been studying relationship for 30 years. He has an amazing work on trust and betrayal. And the first thing I read, trust is built in the smallest of moments. And he calls them sliding door moments. Sliding Doors is a movie with Gwyneth Paltrow from the 90s. Have y'all seen this movie? So it's a really tough movie because what happens is it follows her life to this seemingly unimportant moment where she's trying to get on a train, and she makes the train, but the movie stops and splits into two parts, where she makes the train and she doesn't make the train, and it follows them to radically different endings. And he would argue that trust is a sliding door moment. And the example that he gives is so powerful. He said he was lying in bed one night. He had 10 pages left of his murder mystery. And he had a feeling he knew who the killer was, but he was dying to finish this book. So he said, I want to get up, brush my teeth, go to the bathroom and get back in and not have to get up. I just want, that feeling when you just want to get all situated and read the end of your book. So he gets up and he walks past his wife in the bathroom who's brushing her hair and who looks really sad. And he said, my first thought was, just keep walking, just keep walking. And how many of you have had that moment where you walk past someone and you're like, oh God, avert your eyes. Or you look at caller ID or your cell phone and you're like, oh yeah, I know she's in a big mess right now. I don't have time to pick up the phone, right? Yes or no? This looks like guilty laughter to me. So he said, that's a sliding door moment. And here's what struck me about his story. Because he said, there is the opportunity to build trust. And there is the opportunity to betray. Because as small as the moments of trust can be, those are the moments of betrayal as well. To choose to not connect when the opportunity is there is a betrayal. So he took the brush out of her hand and started brushing her hair and said, what's going on with you right now, babe? That's a moment of trust, right? So fast forward 5 years, and I'm clear about trust, and I talk about trust as the marble jar. We gotta really share our stories and our hard stuff with people whose jars are full. People who've over time really done those small things that have helped us believe that they're worth our story. But the new question for me was this: what are those marbles? What is trust? What do we talk about when we talk about trust? Trust is a big word, right? To hear I trust you or I don't trust you, I don't even know what that means. So I wanted to know, what is the anatomy of trust? What does that mean? So I started looking in the research and I found a definition from Charles Feltman that I think is the most beautiful definition I've ever heard. And it's simply this: trust is choosing to make something important to you vulnerable to the actions of someone else. Choosing to make something important to you vulnerable to the actions of someone else. Feltman says that distrust is what I have shared with you that is important to me is not safe with you. So I thought, that's true. And Feltman really calls for this, let's understand what trust is. So we went back into all the data to find out, can I figure out what trust is? Do I know what trust is from the data? And I think I do know what trust is. And I put together an acronym, BRAVING, B-R-A-V-I-N-G, braving. Because when we trust, we are braving connection with someone. So what are the parts of trust? B, boundaries. I trust you if you are clear about your boundaries and you hold them and you're clear about my boundaries and you respect them. There is no trust without boundaries. R, reliability. I can only trust you if you do what you say you're going to do, and not once. Reliability, let me tell you what reliability is in research terms. We're always looking for things that are valid and reliable. Any researchers here or research kind of geeks? There's 10 of us. Okay, so we would say a scale that you weigh yourself on is valid if you get on it and it's an accurate weight, 120. Okay. So that would be a very valid scale. I would pay a lot of money for that scale. So that's actually not a valid scale, but we'll pretend for the sake of this. That's a valid scale. A reliable scale is a scale that if I got on it 100 times, it's gonna say the same thing every time. So what reliability is you do what you say you're going to do over and over and over again. You cannot gain and earn my trust if you're reliable once, because that's not the definition of reliability. In our working lives, reliability means that we have to be very clear on our limitations so we don't take on so much that we come up short and don't deliver on our commitments. In our personal life, it means the same thing. So when we say to someone, oh God, it was so great seeing you, I'm gonna give you a call and we can have lunch. Yes or no? No. It was really great seeing you. Moment of discomfort, goodbye. Right? But honest. So B, boundaries are reliability. A, huge, accountability. I can only trust you if, when you make a mistake, you are willing to own it, apologize for it, and make amends. I can only trust you if when I make a mistake, I am allowed to own it, apologize, and make amends. No accountability, no trust. V, and this one shook me to the core. Vault, the vault. What I share with you, you will hold in confidence. What you share with me, I will hold in confidence. But you know what we don't understand? And this came up over and over again in the research. We don't understand the other side of the vault. That's only one door on the vault. Here's where we lose trust with people. If a good friend comes up to me and says, oh my God, did you hear about Caroline? They're getting a divorce. And it is ugly. I'm pretty sure her partner's cheating. You have just shared something with me that was not yours to share. And now my trust for you, even though you're gossiping and giving me the juice, now my trust for you is completely diminished. Does that make sense? So the vault is not just about the fact that you hold my confidences. It's that in our relationship, I see that you acknowledge confidentiality. Here's the tricky thing about the vault. A lot of times, we share things that are not ours to share as a way to hotwire connection with a friend, right? If you don't have anything nice to say, come sit next to me. You know, that's our, yes or no? Like our closeness is built on talking bad about other people. You know what I call that? Common enemy intimacy. What we have is not real. The intimacy we have is built on hating the same people. And that's counterfeit. That's counterfeit trust. That's not real. So the vault means you respect my story, but you respect other people's story. I, integrity. I cannot trust you and be in a trusting relationship with you if you do not act from a place of integrity and encourage me to do the same. So what is integrity? So I came up with this definition because I didn't like any of the ones out there, and that's what I do when I don't like them. I do. I look in the data and I say, what's integrity? Here's what I think integrity is. 3 pieces. It's choosing courage over comfort, choosing what's right over what's fun, fast, or easy, and practicing your values, not just professing your values. Right? I mean, that's integrity. In non-judgment, I can fall apart, ask for help, and be in struggle without being judged by you. And you can fall apart and be in struggle and ask for help without being judged by me. Which is really hard because we're better at helping than we are asking for help. And we think that we've set up trusting relationships with people who really trust us because we're always there to help them. But let me tell you this, if you can't ask for help and they cannot reciprocate that, that is not a trusting relationship, period. And when we assign value to needing help, when I think less of myself for needing help, whether you're conscious of it or not, when you offer help to someone, you think less of them too. You cannot judge yourself for needing help but not judge others for needing your help. And somewhere in there, if you're like me, you're getting value from being the helper in a relationship. You think that's your worth. But real trust doesn't exist unless help is reciprocal and non-judgment. The last one is G, generosity. Our relationship is only a trusting relationship if you can assume the most generous thing about my words, intentions, and behaviors, and then check in with me. So if I screw up, say something, forget something, you will make a generous assumption and say, yesterday was my mom's 1-year anniversary of her death, and it was really tough for me, and I talked to you about it last month. And I really was hoping that you would have called. But I know you care about me. I know you think it's a big deal, so I wanted to let you know that I've been thinking about that. As opposed to not returning calls, not returning emails, and waiting for the moment where you can spring, well, you forgot to call on this important, you'll make a generous assumption about me and check it out. Does that make sense? So we've got boundaries, reliability, accountability, the vault, integrity, non-judgment, and generosity. This is the anatomy of trust, and it's complex. Why do we need to break it down? For a very simple reason. How many of you in here have ever struggled with trust in a relationship, professional or personal? It should be everybody, statistically, right? And so what you end up saying to someone is, I don't trust you. What do you mean you don't trust me? I love you. I'm so dependable. What do you mean you don't trust me? How do we talk about trust if we can't break it down? What understanding trust gives us is words to say, here's my struggle. You're not reliable with me. You say you're going to do something, I count on it, you don't do it. Or maybe the issue is non-judgment. But we can break it down and talk about it and ask for what we need very specifically, instead of using this huge word that has tons of weight and value around it. We can say, here's specifically what's not working. What's not working is we've got a boundaries issue. So one of the things that's interesting, I think, is one of the biggest casualties with heartbreak and disappointment and failure and our struggle is not just a loss of trust with other people, but the loss of self-trust. When something hard happens in our lives, the first thing we say is, I can't trust myself. I was so stupid. I was so naive. So this braving acronym works with self-trust too. So when something happens, I just recently went through a really tough failure, and I had to ask myself, did I honor my own boundaries? Was I reliable? Can I count on myself? Did I hold myself accountable? Was I really protective of my stories? Did I stay in my integrity? Was I judgmental toward myself? And did I give myself the benefit of the doubt? Was I generous toward myself? Because if braving relationships with other people is braving connection, self-trust is braving self-love, self-respect, the wildest adventure we'll ever take in our whole lives. And so what I would invite you to think about when you think about trust is, if your own marble jar is not full, if you can't count on yourself, you can't ask other people to give you what you don't have. So we have to start with self-trust. There's a great quote from Maya Angelou that says, I don't trust people who don't love themselves, but say, I love you, right? She quotes an African proverb when she said that, and she said, be wary of the naked man offering you a shirt. And so a lot of times, if you find yourself in struggle with trust, the thing to examine first is your own marble jar. How you treat yourself, because we can't ask people to give to us something that we do not believe we're worthy of receiving. And you will know you're worthy of receiving it when you trust yourself above everyone else. So thank y'all so much. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you. Thank y'all.
So what did everybody think? I'm gonna pull up this as a reminder of what that acronym was. Um, so what are your thoughts or key takeaways from that video? Go ahead and use the chat. Feel free to unmute if you'd like. Also scrolling up to make sure I got all the direct messages answered. Karen says it's time to reevaluate the marble jar. 100%. Um, I actually recently came into issues with trust in a relationship that I thought it was a person or a close friend. And until I saw this video and this acronym, I was like, okay, what went wrong here? What went wrong here? And looking at all of this, I was like, every single one of these things went wrong. So I feel like this is a really great tool to evaluate that marble jar. Oh, and Kyle says, don't gossip or talk negatively about people just to have a common enemy. Yep, that is really great. We're getting an amen there. I actually really like that, Kyle. Don't gossip or talk negatively about people just to have a common enemy. That's really powerful. So thank you for submitting that. And Wanda says, have to be able to trust yourself first. Yeah. Does that feel harder? 100%. And I'm curious, like, why that does feel harder. And I think, a lot of it is that negative self talk. Some of it could be imposter syndrome. Yep. And people are agreeing, like, trusting yourself first is easier said than done. Rebecca says it's okay to ask for help. Just be careful who you trust. Jessica said there was one quote, paying attention to people that practice their values rather than the people that just tell everyone what their values are and don't actually model it. That resonated with me. I agree. I remember I've worked with people that say that they really value direct communication, but it seemed like they only appreciated direct communication when it was them directing, like confronting other people. But like when, you were trying to set boundaries and have that honest and open conversation, it wasn't well received because it was the seats were reversed. Jamie, I love that you pointed out having generosity and then assuming positive intent. I don't know if you guys remember from our second session, we talked about this a lot. And I remember that was one of the big things that resonated with me is just giving that most generous interpretation so that, this person didn't go out of their way to necessarily harm me. Until you see that pattern, give them that generous intent. But once they kind of show that pattern of like, okay, they don't deserve this generosity. Yeah, and 100%. We're our hardest critic, and trust takes time, effort, and proof to build. Yep, the marble jar, exactly. So, do you feel like this information is beneficial to your work? And if so, like, how do you see this actually benefiting you in the workplace, either with the people that you're supporting, the staff that you're working with, your relationship with your supervisors? Rebecca says modeling, practicing what you preach, 100%. I think that kind of goes back to the reliability. Do what you say you're going to do and do it often or always. Yeah, Jamie says that we definitely have opportunities to build trust every day with the little things. one thing that I can see is if you have like scheduled one-on-one meetings with staff or staff meetings, sticking to those meetings, because if you were to cancel that quite a bit, that kind of shows that there's not the reliability there, but then also it can make people feel like, oh, I'm just not a priority. I've worked for people before where they constantly were canceling our check-ins. So it just felt like, okay, my work doesn't matter. Like I'm not, a priority here. And it's like, I didn't need a whole hour of your time. Just wanted to get your insight on a couple things. So, and I love to think of that as a marble jar moment. I think I would have been much better mental health wise if I had had that vocabulary back then. Karen says it's helpful to identify and recognize problematic behavior, even if you don't understand the motivation for it. At least you have a better understanding of what's happening. Yeah, 100%. We've talked a lot about like compassion fatigue and some of those workplace performance things that you might see, which is like those behavior changes. So, maybe calling in more often. And I feel like if you were to use this braving acronym along with like just checking in with people, that's going to help you have a better understanding of what's happening and not just jumping to that judgment of, oh, this person just doesn't care anymore. This person isn't doing a good job. They're not doing anything. No, there's probably more going on under the surface and just being there and having a chance for that connection. Well, I really hope you enjoyed that video. I personally really love that. For the sake of time, I would like to introduce Hillary Licini, who is actually my supervisor, and she's going to talk about effective communication with supervisors. So let me see here if I can. I cannot. Let me unshare, then I'll reshare. There we go. So thank you, Hillary, for being here today.
Yeah, thank you. Krista asked me to do it, and I said, "Are you sure I'm the right person?" So I'm hoping the answer is still yes. But I think I have been really lucky in supervising the people that I have, and I like to think I learned a lot along the way because I didn't always have the best supervisors, and so I just want to kind of share a little bit about you of what I had learned on maybe how not to supervise people, and also some takeaways on how you can approach your supervisor if you're having difficulties, and also how you can work with the people that you do supervise to have a really good working relationship. And a lot of what I have not seen that video, that Brene Brown one that we just watched before, but I thought it was excellent. And I think it ties into some of the things that I have, which is, happy coincidence. But so we'll kind of just I'll do a brief overview, and if there's questions along the way, feel free to stop me or put them in the chat box, and then maybe we can just have a brief conversation at the end of anything that maybe resonated with you, or things that you want to share if you've had similar experiences, or maybe you had awful experiences and these were your takeaways, and here's how you do things differently in your life because of that experience. So Krista was gracious enough to do my slides for me because technology is not always my friend. So I wanted to start with this first quote by Stephen Covey: "Treat your employees exactly as you want them to treat your best customers." And so customers can mean a lot of different things, but when we set those expectations by the treatment that we give others, that's how they then will behave. And so we always want to model and treat our employees in the best possible way, so they turn around and feel validated and can then treat your customers in the same way. So my first experience with the supervisor, this was fresh out of college, undergrad. My first job was, my undergrad degree was in speech pathology. So here I go out to change the world, and I worked at a school that had some really, really challenging students, lots of self-contained classrooms. It was hard. And so my first supervisor, her name was Linda. And she, I don't know where she is today. I'm hoping that she has grown, but she was not great when she was my supervisor. Um, I remember very distinctly we would so we did extended school year, so you have all year with the kids, and then if those who qualified, they got those 6 to 8 weeks in the summer to prevent regression. And so before summer would start, or before the new school year would kick back up, all of the speech therapists, the different therapists would sit together and make our master schedule, because that's challenging to do. So who's on whose caseload? How does that fit? And I remember that Linda would make her schedule before coming to that meeting. So she got to pick all of the kiddos that were not challenging and were pretty, there weren't many, they didn't have behaviors. They're pretty straightforward, easy kids. And we were left with everyone else. And that's our job, right? We work with those kids, but it becomes really taxing when you have a student 5 times a week with challenging behaviors and you don't really get a break. There's not that easy one on your caseload that you kind of look forward to. And it was super frustrating. After Linda retired, one of our other speech therapists took over, and the very first thing, she was my favorite, the very first thing she did was, everyone go on their caseload and give me one of your most challenging students, the one that you might just need a break from. So Sue's caseload was made up entirely of all of the challenging students. And that really just taught me, as a supervisor, before I was a supervisor, kind of instilled in me, like, don't ask your employees to do something that you're not willing to do. Because I think that just sets that model of, I'm not going to do it, but you have to go do it. And that's not building trust. That's not building so many of the things that that we learned just in that video. And so that really stuck with me of, when Sue came on, she could have done the same thing. That's, she had seniority, she has the title, she's got the fancy office now, but she rolled up her sleeves and took our hardest students, because she saw how, supervision was modeled before, and she wanted to change that. Okay, next slide. So then when I did become a supervisor, I took some of those lessons that I learned along the way, and really wanted to make sure that in my role here at the university, that people feel like they can come in and they can trust me, and we can have that relationship. And this kind of, I feel like, is part of that vault that Brene Brown talked about. So if someone comes in, and I have an open door policy, like my door's only closed if I'm on a phone call or in a meeting. Otherwise, come in. Like, you don't need an appointment, just come in. And if someone's really struggling, one of the first things I'll say is, okay, are you just venting, or do I need to do something with this information? Because I think that builds that level of trust of, sometimes you just need to get stuff out, and you don't want that judgment. You don't want advice. You just want to get it out to feel better. So I have a running joke with one of our project managers here, where she says, sometimes if I can just run into your office and maybe drop the F-bomb a couple of times and then run out, I'll be better. And I'll say, okay, is this that kind of day? Close the door, let it out, and then go. Or other times people say, I really need you to do something with this now. Maybe they've popped in twice before and it was just for venting, and now it's like the 3rd time and they're saying, I think something really needs to change then. But I always want to be sure to be that, like, safe landing space where if someone wants to put it in the vault, I will keep it in the vault until it's time that something really does need to come up, and I don't share that information with other people unless I have their permission to. Or, I have been in some instances where it truly was something that I couldn't just keep. And so, but I would say to them, I really do need to do something with this, but I will try my best to keep your information as private as I can, or just discuss the scenario without bringing other people in, or do I have your permission to talk to so-and-so about that? So I always want to make sure that I'm being as honest as I can be. But again, if they just want you to listen, then just be that great listener. Next. So, thinking about like, when you're talking to your supervisor, then I think it's important to be honest with what you need. So, like I said, you can always come in and vent, but it also, I think, at some point needs to be productive venting, right? Like if you're coming in lots and I'm always there to listen, but what do you really need then? Like think when you come in, be honest. Is it I just can't work with this person anymore because these things have happened, and here's how I've tried to do it and fix it on my own, but it's just not working. So coming in and instead of saying, oh, I think I can try it one more time. If you're at that point where you really can't work with that person, or whatever the scenario might be honest with what you need, because then I can help you get to a solution that feels good for everyone. But if I don't know how you're truly feeling, or what those boundaries are, or what it might be, then it's not going to be as productive as it could be. Also, having realistic expectations on solutions. Sometimes, maybe it's you have to continue working with that person because that's how it is, or you have to continue working with that client even though they're really, really challenging. But coming up with maybe solutions to help make it better, to eventually transition to a better spot. So if someone comes in and says it's either her or me, someone needs to get fired, right? Like that's not a realistic expectation on a solution that I can help you come up with. So it's always helpful as a supervisor if someone comes in and we can have that open conversation, because you've put in some thought about it as well, so that I can help you get to a better place. And then helping to offer those solutions. What does that look like? And having those productive conversations. And maybe it's more than one time coming into your supervisor or talking to someone that you supervise. Some things are more challenging and you have to do more check-ins of how are things going with the issue that we had talked about a couple weeks ago. How else can I help? Okay, we said we were going to try this. How did that work? I think sometimes things can be like a one and done conversation, and then other times you really need to have multiple conversations that are productive to get you to that best solution. Okay, next. So then how can supervisors help their staff? They can help pick up that slack. And sometimes I know that's not always, they can't pick up everything, but if someone really comes in and says, I'm struggling with this, someone on my caseload, or I'm struggling to get this report done, as a supervisor, how can you help them out? Is it putting something of yours aside and doing that? That happened recently here, where one of our project directors had to be out for an extended period of time, and I saw the whole group band together and see how, okay, I can pick this part up, or someone else can help with that. So I think that's how supervisors can help their staff, is being realistic of maybe you can't put that all on one other person, but then talking to other people and seeing how can we collectively come up with a solution. But also remember that you can't fill the cup if their pitcher is empty, right? And so if you're overloaded and if your staff is overloaded, they can't continue to help more people. And so really recognizing how can we help each other. And maybe it's just this month, I really need someone to pick up this piece of it for me. And then I just need to recharge. I need, a couple mental health days to come back in and be in a better place. We can figure out a solution so that you can continue doing that good job. And so many of those other pieces, to continue to be reliable and accountable, because you're being honest about what you needed. And then we can continue that trust of when you need something, I trust that you're going to come and tell me about it so that we can continue the good work that we're doing. There's so many pieces of that piece that Krista had showed that really resonates with a lot of these things. And so making sure that everyone is in a space, and maybe it's, I'm already overwhelmed, but I feel like I can take a couple more things to help you out. And be honest, can you do that? And so really just that open communication and seeing what everyone needs, I think is so important on both sides of being a supervisor and working with your supervisor. Okay, go ahead to the next one. Okay, and then making a plan. If you or your employee need more, make that plan. Like what does that look like? Is it what is the timeline on that? And sometimes it's hard to make a timeline, and it could be, let's try this for a week. Let's visit again, see if you need more. Are you ready to come back? Do we need to shift responsibilities around? If they're really in a place where it's more than that's outside of your wheelhouse, knowing what community supports that you can offer, because as a supervisor, I think sometimes we feel like we always have to have an answer, or when you go to your supervisor, I think sometimes it can feel frustrating if you leave there without coming, or if you go there and leave without coming to a solution or different resources, you think, well, I'm not going to talk to them again because they weren't overly helpful. So I think just always knowing what different community supports are available to offer up as different solutions is always helpful. Planned follow-up meetings. And so, like I said, sometimes things aren't just resolved in a one-time meeting. So and like Krista said, stick with those follow-up meetings then, because they are important and they make people feel important. That's happened to me before, where I feel very slighted because we had standing meetings, but something more important popped up, so I got pushed off. I understand that as a supervisor, some things come up and it's an emergency and you have to deal with it in that moment, but try not to make that common practice. And so if you are working with someone, plan those follow-up meetings and stick with those follow-up meetings, because that really does, I think, like Brene Brown said, that's a sliding door marble moment. If you keep missing those, you're not putting any of those marbles in the jar. That trust is not being built. And then continue to communicate, even when you feel like maybe it's resolved and they stop coming to you, or you stop coming to your supervisor, to maybe just do some follow-ups and say, hey, haven't talked to you in a little bit. Are things still on a, good? Can I offer support in a different way? And as coworkers, I think we can do that too. Okay, next. Okay, so that's the last slide. So, there's so much, we only have like a small little moment to talk about this as a case presentation, but I'm hoping some of these things are helpful, or I'm curious to see, does any of this resonate? Are you in a supervisor position where you have some kind of experience with this, or have you ever addressed things with your supervisor or wish they would have done it in a different way? So maybe if we can take 1 or 2 minutes to just kind of, if you're comfortable either putting things in the chat or sharing out different experiences, either from the supervisor side or supervisee.
Yeah, thank you so much, Hillary. We'll give everyone a moment to put that in the chat. But I love this whole concept of like the marble sliding glass door moments, because it's just such a nice way to like think through. Like, I've actually only been at NDCB for 3 years now, and like there's been so many small marble moments that have like built my trust within this group, or within the workplace. And so I just love to think about it like that, instead of like, why am I happy here? And then just thinking about all those like little moments that really add up. Also, having that open door policy, I've had to use that many, many times. There's been times where I've left a meeting and I'm like ready to like quit everything. Like, I'm gonna ruin this committee that we created and I'm done. Everybody else can do it. And then once I get that all off my chest, I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna go take a nap after work, and then I'm usually fine. I say I'm fueled by spite to make it actually work, but maybe there's something else there. So any questions or stories that you want to share that have impacted your trust in the workplace, or any takeaways of things that you would like to learn more about? One thing I forgot to mention, so one of the key messages from Brené's work with her vulnerability and shame work is practicing gratitude. We've talked about that in previous sessions, and we've talked about how great, gratitude journals are. And this is something that I have like an intention to start, but I also know myself well enough that this is a whole new habit and behavior that I probably will not be able to do on my own. And so I was thinking about, like, one of the big pillars of Project Echo is building those community of practices. And so it's like, what happens outside of our Echo series once they're wrapped up? So I had this idea. I think it would be really cool if we had a really informal gratitude group for those that are interested in maybe doing a little bit more like mindful gratitude practices, and maybe we can meet bi-weekly, share how that's going, maybe share some successes that are happening in your personal life and in your work life that maybe you don't get to share with other people. Maybe we could use this group to get some feedback when we feel like we're struggling in our work. And I'm curious if anybody is interested in us starting up something like that just for a few weeks after this series starts. If that is the case, I do have, Jody, I can't see my poll option. I do have a poll that we're just simply asking for your name and email if this is something that you're interested in. If you want to put that into that poll, then we can follow up with you and maybe get something like this started in mid-August. Okay, I can see that. I'm going to go ahead and move on because we only have 5 minutes left. So you can move that poll out of the way, but I'll leave that up and going in case anybody is interested in that. Like I said, this poll is simply if you're interested in possibly doing like a little gratitude group to keep in touch with all the people that have been attending these series or this series. Go ahead and give us your name and email, and then we'll follow up with some times to meet. And like I said, it'll be really informal and just kind of a nice way to keep in touch with everybody, and hopefully be successful with keeping our gratitude journals, because like I said, I just know myself well enough. I won't actually do it if I don't have a group that's motivating me in the behind the scenes. So I just want to celebrate each and every one of you. You guys have been taking time on this pretty long journey of 10 weeks. We've been all learning and growing together. I'm a really big believer that lifelong learning keeps you interested and interesting. So I really hope that you just found this series helpful and you have a new perspective on your work. Our jobs are not easy. We have so many challenges and barriers that we face every day. So I just want to finish up with one last video from Brené. This video just kind of came at the perfect time when I was ready to quit that committee that I talked about earlier. And I really felt like this video kind of helped me stay resilient in my work. So I hope it just helps you leave here feeling empowered as well. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we'll watch one last video, and then we will be done for the Direct Care Resilience series.
And so my story is that I am a researcher, and I never thought I would have a big public career. And so I did a TED Talk that went very viral. And in the wake of that, I was kind of everywhere for a couple of months, on every CNN.com, NPR. It was everywhere, and something I wasn't used to. And the marching orders from my therapist and my husband were, do not read the comments online. So I read all the comments online. And so one morning, I woke up and there were 2 or 3 new articles out, and I started reading the comments. And they were devastating. They weren't about my work, they were about me. They were super personal. And they were the things that creative people play in their mind and then give up doing what they really want to do. Like if I asked every single one of you, what would you try if you knew people would never say this about you? What would this be? Those were the comments that morning. Of course she embraces imperfection. What choice does she have? Look how she looks. I feel sorry for her kids. Less research, more Botox. Just mean personal attacks, the things that really, up until that moment, had inspired me to stay very small in my life and my career, just so I could avoid those things. So that morning, Steve and the kids leave. I stay home. I get on the couch and I watch 8 hours of Downton Abbey. And when it's over, I don't want to turn off Downton Abbey. Because the minute you turn off Downton Abbey, then it's like soccer practice and dinner and back to the mean people. And maybe, should I get Botox? And maybe, maybe if I stand still when I talk. So I get out my laptop and I do a search for who was president in the United States during the Downton Abbey era. Have you ever done that? Like you're numbing with TV or a movie, and so when it's over, you just like stay in that space by like learning more about the actors and what's going on. I've been doing this long enough to know this is like, you're laughing with me, not at me. So I put it in, and Theodore Roosevelt comes up, and a quote comes up. And I read it, and this is what it says. It's a quote from a speech that he gave in the early 1900s at the Sorbonne, and a lot of people call it the Man in the Arena speech. And this is the passage that changes my life. It's not the critic who counts. It's not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done it better. The credit belongs to the person who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred with blood and sweat and dust, who, at the best, in the end, knows the triumph of high achievement, and who, at worst, if he fails daring greatly. So the moment that I read that, I closed my laptop, and this is what shifted in me. 3 huge things. First, I spent the last 12 years studying vulnerability, and that quote was everything I know about vulnerability. It is not about winning, it's not about losing, it's about showing up and being seen. The second thing, this is who I want to be. I want to create. I want to make things that didn't exist before I touched them. I want to show up and be seen in my work and in my life. And if you're going to show up and be seen, there is only one guarantee, and that is you will get your ass kicked. That is the guarantee. That's the only certainty you have. If you're going to go in the arena and spend any time in there whatsoever, especially if you've committed to creating in your life, you will get your ass kicked. So you have to decide at that moment, I think for all of us, if courage is a value that we hold, this is a consequence. You can't avoid it. The third thing, which really set me free, and I think Steve, my husband, would argue has made me somewhat dangerous, is kind of a new philosophy about criticism, which is this. If you're not in the arena also getting your ass kicked, I'm not interested in your feedback. Period. That's it. If you have constructive information, feedback to give me, I want it. And I'm an academic. I'm hardwired for wrestling around with stuff like that. If you say, hey, you forgot all this literature, or hey, you should have done this, or terrible sentence construction over here, like, let's do it. I love that. But if you're in the cheap seats, not putting yourself on the line, and just talking about how I could do it better, I'm in no way interested in your feedback.
Hey, it's #1 best-selling. Okay, so I am sharing a feedback form in the chat. If everybody could just fill that out. Just a heads up, this one is comprehensive for the series as a whole, so just keep that in mind. Again, I just want to thank everybody for coming. And for everyone that signed up for that gratitude focus group chat that we're gonna set up. We have to come up with a catchy name for it, but I look forward to everybody seeing everyone there. So have a good day, guys. I'll leave it open a little bit, just so everyone can get into the form and then
Kyle, I'm seeing Ashley in the chat cannot access the form.
oh,
Multiple
okay,
people cannot
okay.
access the form. I think we
Okay.
know the fix. So
Yeah,
Kyle,
I saw same silly mistake every time. So now try it.
Kyle, that has not happened every time. This is the first time, so, and you knew exactly how to fix it right away.
Okay. Okay.
Is everybody, do they have access now?
Yeah, I gave everybody access.
Perfect. Well, thank you everybody once again. I can't believe this is over. I honestly will probably go and like cry a little bit because I just love the series so much. So just thank you all for being here. And we'll follow up for those who are interested in that. And I do want to say, check out, keep an eye on our website. I think we do have a listserv link on the main Project Echo site for any upcoming series that we're going to be offering. We have 3 in the works right now. In February, we're going to be launching one about supporting people with disabilities that are experiencing loneliness and those with poor mental health. I'm very, very excited for that series. I think we're going to be talking a lot about that sense of belonging and how do you find that, especially when you're dealing with like the impacts of ableism and all that fun stuff. So very early stages of conceptualizing that. We're really excited for that series. So if you enjoyed this one, I bet you will enjoy that one. That one's probably going to launch in February of next year. We also have a couple other ones on the horizons, and so we'll keep those on our website. And like I said, we have a listserv so we can keep you posted whenever these sessions are available. And thank you again, Hillary, for presenting today.
Well, thanks for having me.